Experts off their turf. Episode 19 of the Unbelieving Scum. How you guys doing? It's been a while. Um, Dr. Yuval Noah Harari, hope I said his name right, is a New York Times best-selling Israeli historian. He writes very interesting books about humans, popular and entertaining chronicles of our history and our possible future. He gets into human evolution a little bit. As a PhD and professor of history at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, he is certainly a well-educated person and in human history. Besides being a best-selling author and a well-published historian, he is also admirably an activist for democracy and science. But as far as knowledge of animal behavior, neuroscience, cognitive science, and human evolution, he's decidedly off his turf. His 2:15 TED Talk garnered over 9 million views. In it, he claims there is nothing special about human individuals and their brains. According to the good professor, our bodies and brains are largely equivalent to those of a chimpanzee. He could not be more wrong. Quote, usually we look for the difference between us and all the other animals on the individual level. I want to believe, according to Harari, that there is something special about me, about my body, about my brain that makes me superior to a dog or a chimp or a pig, chimpanzee mainly. But the truth is, on the individual level, I'm embarrassingly similar to a chimpanzee. Unquote. The ignorance of that statement is more than appalling. And that statement is made in support of his thesis that our formidable social skills are what is paramount in human evolution, human accomplishment, that it is only our level of social interactions that make us different from all the other critters, chimpanzees included. When in fact, I think he's completely wrong. It is our individual cognitive and physical abilities which enable our uniquely human social interactions that have produced all the complexities of modern civilization he emphasizes throughout the talk. Like I said, he should stick to history. We are individually so far beyond pigs, dogs, and yes, even chimps in our bodies' physical abilities, and especially our brain's cognitive abilities, that already by 70,000 years ago, there's no comparison. He uses 70,000 years as a real milestone in human advancement. So we'll get back to that. Our huge differences are at the individual level. Each human is born with a uniquely configured human brain, which is a pattern-seeking, concept-forming information sponge, qualitatively different in cognition than any other animal, which underlies all our success and impact on the environment. And those cognitive differences are what produce our unique social skills. His ridiculous need, and that of many social scientists today, to make certain we never admit we may have evolved cognitive skills that surpass other animals, and qualitatively so, is breathtaking in its absurdity. I'm sorry, it's repeated a lot. Harari carries it to new heights in his 2:15 TED Talk. He makes the obligatory supplication to our social skills and ignores the intellect that fuels them. Without our uniquely evolved cleverness, there would be nothing to talk about. We wouldn't have those social interactions any different than any other critter. Without concepts, without our scientific conceptual knowledge, without concepts of kin and clan and nation and things like that, we wouldn't have the gossip that we have, etc. And there'd be no pyramids, religions, money, laws, or political systems, or science. The absurdity is compounded by this further assertion of his. Quote, I guess if they took almost any one of you and placed you alone with a chimpanzee on some island, the chimpanzee would do much better. Unquote. Now that claim floored me. That's, wow. Wow. He's talking through his ass there. He's a historian. He's not an animal behavior specialist. He's not a primatologist, not an anthropologist. His claiming of superiority over the chimp over a human stuck on a deserted island is not merely a tad ridiculous, it's just plain wrong. When people get off their turf and expound outside their disciplines, this is what happens. Let's start with our bodies being different. Being bipedal and hairless, we can walk long distances to forage for food and run down game or track animals for miles, and thereby have a fighting chance to produce food on said deserted island. Chimps would collapse in a panting sweat, like your overheated dog, with any kind of exertion like that. Foraging in the hot sun across miles of island without the shade of a tropical jungle canopy that the chimp is used to would not be in the chimp's repertoire. And the human could fashion a palm frond or some other piece of vegetation to serve as a hat to block out the harsh rays of the sun. More importantly, unless the island had equatorial African fruits, edible, appealing, and recognizable to chimps, the chimp would be SOL when it came to having anything to eat. There might be a few such islands, okay, but the vast majority of islands around the globe would have little to nothing a chimp could eat. As predominantly frugivores, eating fruits like figs and berries and leaves, with the occasional termite or rare helping of baby monkey meat, they do some omnivorous stuff, the chimp is so highly adapted to their tiny band of Central African forest and savanna, it wouldn't know how or where to start in too different in any environment. That's why they're nearly extinct, restricted to eating only what is in their tiny slice across central equatorial Africa. It's evident that they have never successfully ventured into other environments. This is a creature highly adapted to one specific environment and food sources, and in 6 million years, really hasn't shown any ability to live anywhere outside its home range. Okay? Humans, on the other hand, can and have lived just about anywhere on the planet. My money would not be on the chimp. Humans, unlike the food-restricted chimps, are omnivores and global opportunists. We occupy the cognitive niche, where we problem solve and adapt our way into damn near any environment. Exception is Antarctica. Other than that, we populated every continent. Using our uniquely evolved cognition. The human on the island, with their physical abilities to forage for, extract, and process all sorts of foods, and a brain that allows us to search for and identify things to sample and eat, could find fruits, berries, crack open coconuts, dig roots, eat fish and shellfish, forage for bird and reptile eggs, snare reptiles and snakes, devise clever traps to catch small mammals, birds, crab, turtles, hunt large mammals. None of these foods would be readily accessible to the chimp, nor would they have any notion how to procure them on their own. They might eat some of these foods in captivity, but only if a human provides it for them. Even tropical islands can get pretty chilly at night, and the ability to make shelter, primitive clothing, and especially fire would be vital to survival, as well in allowing a way to stay warm and dry, cook food, right? Using fire and cooking was something humans had been doing for nearly 1 million years by 70,000 years ago. The first cold rain and the chimp would be fucked. Continuing with differences in body and brain that all human individuals possess, can a chimp make the ulnar grip, right? He can't touch his puny thumb to his pinky and make a full fist baton grip. Or our precision grip. He can do a little bit of that, okay, which we can use to manipulate all sorts of objects to enhance our survival, such as fashion sharp stone tools, whittle a stick to dig roots and tubers, make twine, grab whole branches, logs to build shelters, make fires for our survival. The chimp is helpless in this regard. The difference in our bodies and brains would be huge to our survival over a chimp. And the human can swim. Chimps can't swim. They avoid water. So wading in the surface or creek or river to forage food is out as well. They tend to shy away from water sources and couldn't take advantage of either ocean tidal pools, riverine, or fresh water. They couldn't eat ocean and tidal critters. The chimp couldn't venture to find out anything or eat anything if it could, right? Human have a plethora of options the chimp wouldn't have, okay? The good professor continues, quote, "The real difference between humans and all other animals is not on the individual level, it's on the collective level." Unquote. That's the narrative that must be maintained. It's all social, and it's wrong as well. As far as our brains, it is our individual cognitive skills which we are wired at birth to develop, which all normally raised children acquire in childhood, that allow for those later collective skills, not the other way around. We have evolved to be qualitatively different in cognition, problem-solving skills, try and error learning, and eventually theoretical science. We can figure out all sorts of things individually, and then we share those with others. It's not solely collective learning and info sharing that makes it different. It is each human individual ideas and solutions that we then share that give us our unparalleled accomplishments as an information sharing civilization. Again, if we weren't able to individually create incredible ideas, concepts, clever things, we wouldn't have anything more to share than the average animal. The human on the island can think, how do I attach this vine to this limb to secure the roof of my shelter? The chimp knows none of those concepts, nor the objects or specific actions on them. Even the most cityfied of humans, without any training and survival skills, would attempt to build a shelter, using the human hand grips and their bipedal body leverage to employ the concepts in the above thoughts, and successfully build a shelter to keep out the wind and the rain, however primitive, right? The chimp would have no way, physically or mentally, to achieve anything resembling the most basic survival techniques a thinking human would. The chimp can make a nest out of grass to sleep in up in the trees, but that's about it. In addition, where Dr. Harari could have also done his homework is actually in his field. There have been thousands of humans who have lived in isolation over the millennia, from religious hermits to shipwrecked, exiled, and otherwise marooned castaways who survived many years on deserted islands, to solitary individuals who have chosen to live off the grid, using modern terms, and fend for themselves, and that's happened in every culture, every period throughout human history. Okay? Human isolates have survived in every environment imaginable, from deserted tropical islands to islands and territories in temperate zones with significant change of seasons and weather, even harsh Arctic climates. Chimps would have a real tough time existing for too long anywhere outside their equatorial home range. Human individuals, on the other hand, have survived in just about every environment possible for weeks, months, even years before dying or being rescued. The famous story of Alexander Selkirk, a maroon castaway who was the inspiration for the Robinson Crusoe novel, is just one example. I quote, "Selkirk was left to defend for himself until his eventual rescue, which wouldn't come for over 4 years. During that time, he survived by hunting lobster and crawfish, foraging for food, building fires and huts to provide shelter, and fashioning weapons and clothes." Think a chimpanzee could manage any of that? I don't think so. My money wouldn't be on the chimp. Anytime, anywhere. Stick to your history, pal. A rather bleaker perspective, besides our ability to eat almost anything on the lonely island that the chimp couldn't, we could club or spear the chimp, then skin, roast, and eat him as well, not the other way around. People in many cultures regularly eat other primates, mostly monkeys, and yes, the occasional chimp is taken for bushmeat. He feels we were mostly a rather significant critter up through 70,000 years ago, and that any real impact we started to make on the planet didn't occur until after that time. I might disagree somewhat with that characterization of hominins at 70,000 BP, but we'll get to that later. In all actuality, though, the differences he emphasizes throughout the talk, such as building pyramids, starting religions, exchanging goods with money and banking, developing legal and political systems, really didn't occur for another 65,000 years, after 5,000 years before present, beginning in the late Neolithic. Okay, humans by 70,000 years ago, despite Harari's claims that we were no more significant than jellyfish, fireflies, or woodpeckers. Quote, minding our own business in a corner of Africa, unquote. We had already spread out of Africa across much of the world in a series of migrations starting 2 million years prior to 70,000 years ago. As a historian who writes extensively on the human condition and human evolution, he could have clued his audience in on that fact as well. I know he knows it, but he's making a point. Modern humans, he is correct, did leave Africa after 70,000 years, as he emphasizes, but earlier Homo species left our home continent already, and a number of times, rather different than most other critters. We first left Africa by at least 1.8 million years ago, and by 70,000 years ago had populated all of Africa, much of Europe, including the British Isles, most of Asia, including China, India, Indonesia, and then almost into Australia. Woodpeckers and fireflies never made it to Australia. Jellyfish do populate the entire world's oceans, but I agreed their impact on the planet was as negligible as birds or insects. But humans had already been making stone tools for nearly 3 million years, regularly hunted large animals, forged wooden spears, built shelters, had produced beads and shell ornaments, and left the first evidence of geometric inscriptions. Cave art would soon follow after 70,000 years. No other critter does any of this, much less later build you skyscrapers or make you a hamburger. The firefly, woodpecker, and jellyfish are all like the chimp, stuck in their ancestral environments and adapted specifically to them, and quite successfully for millions of years. But we had already evolved by the late Paleolithic to problem solve our way in nearly any environment, and had already populated 3 continents on the way to a 4th, Australia, and the 5th and 6th, the Americas, a little later on. I would agree with Professor Harari that as of 70,000 years ago, we had not changed the landscape anywhere near as much as in the last 5,000 years of civilization, with monumental architecture, cities, countries, global trade, our phenomenal population explosion, and now even climate-altering manufacturing, transportation, power, and heating and their residues. But we were already doing things no other animal has ever done, hardly unimportant. Language and cultural exchange was already in place. Animals don't do that. Trade over hundreds of miles, ornamentation, art. I think we were already making an impact on the planet, however insignificant compared to later times, that was wholly unlike sea creatures, insects, or birds. So we are decidedly different, more adaptable and cognitively advanced, both individually and collectively, than other animals. It doesn't have to entail that we are superior or have some ridiculous claim to dominion, but we are different, and it's okay to say so. Harari spends a lot of time in the TED Talk explicating how our institutions and our human social collective behaviors, such as money and trade, which are absolutely essential to our modern global civilization, are just ideas, fictional entities. And in the process of doing so, he makes the claim that chimps trade food. Quote, chimpanzees trade, of course. Yes, you give me a coconut, I'll give you a banana. That can work. Unquote. I researched that proposition as well, and I suspect it's as bogus as his other off-the-cuff pronouncements. I think he pulled it out of his ass. Firstly, chimpanzees don't eat a lot of coconuts, if at all, when not fed them in captivity. They're not native to Africa and were introduced only in the last few centuries. They tend towards soft fruits, leaves, shoots. I couldn't find anything demonstrating the trade exchange of foodstuffs, one item for another. Chimps forage communally in a group, but eat individually, and they don't feed each other. Even their offspring are left to collect whatever scraps they can. Chimps only share food, not exchange it, with allies who might share their food with them later. And if they do exchange it, it's meat and for sex, not coconuts for a banana. Males will share meat with females in exchange for sex, Not for a banana. So trading a coconut for a banana seems more than unlikely and just another spontaneous and not well thought out and unresearched bit of fantasizing on the good professor's part. As a trained academic, especially as a historian, who are generally known for their persnicketiness when it comes to references and research, he should know better. Bananas do not grow in the chimp's habitat, and coconuts may be damn few. So the trade of coconut for a banana is a fantasy for a number of reasons. Like I said, I think he pulled it out of his ass. Humans, even your 1-year-old, can abstract relations such as containment, weight, propulsion, support, contact, solidity, and many others, okay, which will eventually include ideas of imaginary objects and entities, courses of action, purposes, etc. Okay? We are cognitively different starting really early on. Chimps and other animals show no capacity for anything beyond basic perceptual ideas. Your young one can make the all gone gesture, referring to all sorts of situations where something is missing, an absence of containment. Something is not in something else. And they can understand weight, propulsion, a whole bunch of abstract relations. Okay? It is those wonderful ideas that make us qualitatively different and enable all the wonderful things that we take for granted in our modern world. It is because we can entertain such ideas in the first place that makes us wholly different. Not just our ability to exchange them, share them, or build our world with them. Once someone has thought of them in the first place, then we can share. Good ideas originate in one person, one individual, another, and then are spread. We have ideas on how to do things, how processes work, how to solve problems, how one thing is related to another. It's those kinds of ideas that make us different. And it is those sorts of abstract entities and relations that we exchange to build our modern world. It is what makes us different. Without that ability, we would only have simple ideas to exchange, right? It's not so much the exchange as the kinds of ideas that only we possess. They make all the difference. The main thrust of the remainder of his talk is how entities we rely on to run modern civilization and our prodigious and ubiquitous social interactions aren't real and exist only in our imaginations. I take exception to that characterization as well. Money is real, and its value is in our agreed upon behavior and time, which we both value, which both have value, excuse me. The behaviors that money and laws, political and business organizations mediate, our actual exchanges and relationships are all very real. And he's dead wrong about the U.S., Google, or the World Bank existing only in our imaginations, just like religious claims and gods. Those three entities, U.S., Google, World Bank, describe human agreements and complex interactions that are global in scope and drive very real behaviors that do exist in the real world. Gods don't exist, Google does. And religions are comprised of pure fantasy. The World Bank is a real thing. Chimps exist too, but not for long on lonely, deserted islands. End of story. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's been a long time coming, over a month. A lot going on. If you like this episode, if you like this channel at all, please hit the subscribe button. Take a look at my Patreon account. Take a look on Amazon for my books. Books soon enough. And support me in any way you can. Really appreciate it. Have a great day. Adios.